Hello, today I'll be reviewing the Canon C100 Mark II. I've had this camera since January, and since then I've shot several short films and promotional videos on it, so I know what it's good at and what it's not good at. The camera is very ergonomic. It has 3 record buttons, so wherever you put your hand, there's always an easy to reach record button. The camera has a side handle and a top handle. The side handle I use mostly for filming and the top handle for carrying the camera around. The viewfinder is very helpful, especially when there's lots of reflections caused by bright lights on the flip-out LCD. And the best thing about the camera is the image. The camera can record in C-Log, which is Canon's log profile and the profile that I always use. It gives you the maximum possible dynamic range and gives you the most room for color grading in post. With the right exposure, color grading and other camera settings, the results are amazing. Colors look really nice and skin tones are accurate. The autofocus on this camera is very good. It has Canon's dual pixel autofocus. It's one of the most accurate and reliable systems available. Now, I know a lot of people don't like autofocus, and when I'm doing narrative projects, I manually focus most of the time. However, if I'm filming an event, or I have the camera on a glide cam when I can't touch the lens, the autofocus does become very useful. It's not as good as a dedicated focus puller, but if you're the only one operating the camera, then it's a good solution. The camera has 3 autofocus settings. The first 2 focus on whatever is in the middle of the frame, and the last one is face tracking. The camera has continuous autofocus, where it will always be trying to focus on whatever is in the center of the frame. There's also one-shot autofocus, where you press a button and the camera focuses on whatever's in the middle of the frame, and then it won't adjust the focus unless you push the button again. I don't use facial tracking very often, because that only works with Canon STM lenses, and I use Sigma art lenses. The camera can do 60 frames per second at 1080p. 120 FPS would have been nice, but 60 is better than nothing. The camera gives you 2 ways to record slow motion. The first is to just set the frame rate to 60 FPS and then slow it down in post. The second way to record slow motion is to use the built-in slow motion feature. This will automatically convert your 60 FPS slow motion into a normal frame rate. This lets you play back your footage in slow motion on the camera, and you don't have to conform your footage in post. However, you can't record any sound with this method. The camera has 2 phantom-powered XLR ports on the top handle and a 3.5mm microphone port on the camera body, so you can use almost any microphone with the camera. The audio quality is good. Not as good as a dedicated recorder, but still very usable. Another benefit of the camera is that it has 3 stops of built-in ND, and you scroll through the different ND options. This is actually one of my favorite features of the camera, and one I use all the time. Getting the correct exposure is a lot easier with built-in ND filters, especially outside. If you want to get a shallow depth of field, then the built-in ND filters make that much easier. Now for my first negative side of the camera, it has 12 stops of dynamic range, which isn't too bad, but often whilst filming, more stops would be helpful, especially outside and in high contrast conditions. The newer Canon cinema cameras like the C700 and C300 Mark II have 15 stops of dynamic range. Whilst I'd like 15 stops in the C100 Mark II, with the right lighting, 12 stops will do. The second thing is that this camera only has 8 color bits. Now I wouldn't mind that if it could output 10 bits through the HDMI port, but it only outputs 8. 10 stops would give me more flexibility with color grading. Now 2 things about the camera that are not really advantages or disadvantages. This camera is not 4K. This camera can only record 1080p, despite having a 4K sensor. The C100 Mark II downsamples its 4K sensor to create a very clean 1080p image. 4K would have been nice, but it's not a deal breaker. This camera is aimed at people who do corporate videos or make documentaries, and you don't need 4K for either of those. The camera can record internally in 2 different codecs, MP4 and AVC HD. Both options are very efficient, but they are quite low bitrate, and it's a good idea to get an external recorder, like the Atomos Ninja Blade. With the Atomos Ninja Blade, I'm able to record in ProRes or DNx HD at 422 chroma subsampling. However, the image is still only 8-bit. So, do I recommend the C100 Mark II? If you want a really small camera, or 4K, then no. But if you want a camera that's ergonomic, produces a nice image, and that can be used for nearly everything, then yes, it's a great camera. It might be worth looking at the more expensive C200, which has better recording options and more features. However, it is around double the price. Thank you for watching this Canon C100 Mark II review. Subscribe for more videos, and I'll see you later.